What is up, Zone Heads? Welcome into this week's edition, live streaming on Facebook of the Zone Heads podcast. You can also find the video stream that will be available later on YouTube, and you can download the podcast wherever you download your favorites. Today, the Top 12 series continues as I preview the upcoming fantasy football season, and today I am focused on the running back position. Always an important one in fantasy football. We had a 2,000-yard rusher last year in Saquon Barkley. More questions than answers as it pertains to Christian McCaffrey. So I will dive in to all of that. Welcome into the latest edition of the Zone Heads podcast presented by Kevin Crager, our go-to real estate agent, one of the top 25 producing agents in Central Florida. If you need a realtor, you also need one that you can trust. And Kevin Crager is going to treat your money like it's his very own. Number scrolling at the bottom of the screen. When it comes to real estate, experience matters. Trust Kevin Crager to guide you every step of the way. Still a lot of changes coming on the horizon for In the Zone, my afternoon show from 3 to 6 p.m. on 96.9 The Game. I promise you, I'm not trying to play coy with you. Tyler Karen, my co-host and producer, who I love very much, is leaving the show as he heads to a big boy job and will be transitioning some of his professional life. So I wish him nothing but the absolute best. I support this decision wholeheartedly from him. And when he is ready, he'll tell you what is next in terms of his ventures, but I'm not going to step on his toes with that. As far as In the Zone goes in the afternoon block on 96.9 The Game, there are options that are being discussed, but until we are at 100% finalized, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag. And then on the back end of the operation, we have to go back on what we've said. So I'm not going to do that until we're at 100%. That should happen by the end of this week. And I will keep you posted either here on this channel or on 96.9 The Game. Definitely going to tell you there because that's where the change is going to occur. As far as this podcast goes, for me, no matter what happens in the afternoon, I'm going to continue to do this. I have been doing my own podcast for, well, I think going on a couple of years now. There's definitely been some stops and starts along the way, but I really enjoy doing this. I like the more intimate feel. Hell, I've got the professional microphone and all of the equipment at home, so why not pop on and talk to you guys about something that I feel like diving more into, top 12 rankings in fantasy football on 96.9 The Game. Sure, I can do that, but I think we can go more in depth here with some of the more niche audience that seems to be into the same stuff that I'm into when it comes to fantasy, sports betting, and the Orlando Magic. You can keep up with all of my content always at zoneheadsmedia.com, not just for what I do on this channel, but all of the video stuff that we do, but whether it's through In the Zone or some of my other partners with RotoWire, Action Network, my daily bets on there as well. Nothing for tonight, the All-Star Game in Major League Baseball. I use this as a time to separate myself from sports betting for a moment. I kind of treat this as if it's a part-time job. And so I am on vacation as far as sports betting goes for at least the next couple of days. And then I'll dive back into the baseball world here shortly, but let's get into it. The reason why you're here, the top 12 running backs in fantasy football. I will start, of course, with number one, that being Saquon Barkley. There is reason to be concerned about Saquon. The 400 touch stigma from year to year is a real thing. The 2,000-yard rushing drop-off is very real. He had 2,000 yards rushing, and when you include the playoffs, well over 400 touches. Typically, running backs that do that, they at least fall off by a considerable amount the very next year. Some of them even get hurt because of the workload that they had a year prior. I'm not going to freak myself out on that regard. When I looked back at some of the other running backs that fell into that trap of they had incredible seasons and then they fell off, there were guys that simply weren't in the ecosystem that Saquon Barkley is in at the stage of Saquon's career that he's at. I use an example like Chris Johnson with the Tennessee Titans many years ago. He was still so young in his career. I think he was still figuring the league out, wound up rushing for 2,000 yards, and then the league caught up to him. It feels like what is happening with Saquon Barkley is in reverse, where he went through all of the rough years. Now he's in the middle of his athletic prime and in the best situation he's ever been in. For me, there's no reason that he still shouldn't be the number one running back in fantasy football. He's still running behind one of the best offensive lines in the game. He's still in his prime. Even if he's 80% of what he was a year ago, he's still going to be a phenomenal pick. Maybe he doesn't finish as RB1, but I feel really good about Saquon Barkley if he's healthy, which you can say about anybody that's on this list. I feel really good about Saquon finishing in the top 5. I don't know how you couldn't when you have as much talent as he has with the Eagles offense surrounding him. So he's still a phenomenal pick here. Most talented running back in the league, A+ ecosystem, as I mentioned, coming off of a year where he finished with 2,283 scrimmage yards in the regular season, 15 touchdowns. Don't overthink it. Saquon Barkley is the best running back in fantasy right now. Number 2, and this is where I start to differ. I think this list for me is going to be more different from consensus than my wide receiver list was a week ago. That episode is available in all of those places that I mentioned earlier. I think a lot of folks are going to have Bijan Robinson here at 2. I've seen a lot of analysts that have him at number 1. I'm gravitating to the better offense here. These two are really close in terms of overall talent. I just think Gibbs is more explosive. He's a better pass catcher, and he has the better supporting cast around him. The only issue for me with Gibbs is volume, because David Montgomery is healthy. He is going to be a factor in this offense. He is part of the offensive identity of this Detroit Lions team, especially in goal line or short yardage situations. But Gibbs averaged 33 points per game with Montgomery off the field last year. Now, we don't need that because that's not a sustainable pace, but his upside is simply greater than what Bijan's is. And I like the fact, I do like that there's another running back in the offense, because to me, what that allows is for Gibbs to stay on the field more consistently week to week. When you are shouldering that load as the only guy that is getting carries between the tackles in an offense, those are the running backs that we see break down most often. So I like Gibbs as far as a guy that I project to stay healthier and with the upside of being the running back 1 in fantasy. But Bijan Robinson, no further than number 3 for me. Volume king of the NFL. Robinson averaged 23.9 touches per game over the last 11 games last season. Over the last games of the year, the last several games of the season, he was actually better than Saquon Barkley and Jahmyr Gibbs. Robinson was one of 3 running backs, rather, with 60 catches last year. He was 5th in touchdowns. There's really not a lot to dislike here. I'm just not enthusiastic about their game scripts. So he's firmly 3rd for me. This is a very firm top 3. I cannot be shaken off of this. Saquon, Gibbs, and Bijan Robinson. And when I get into a heavier draft season, I've done some underdog best ball drafts, but if I were in a position to select a running back, I'm probably sitting at 4 or 5 in a draft where I want to be looking running back as my first player off the board. I might interchange those 3, but if I only had one draft to do this entire draft season, this would be my ranking: Saquon, Gibbs, and then Bijan. At number 4, I am still high on my guy, Christian McCaffrey. And honestly, if I wanted to, I can make the case for putting him at number 1. The reports out of San Francisco are sunshine and rainbows about McCaffrey, and that's good enough for me. When healthy, he is the best running back in football. Hard stop. And that's the case to be made. When CMC is at his best, he is better than all the guys that we just talked about. And he is in an A+ situation that has actually gotten better in terms of volume. If we trusted Christian McCaffrey to stay healthy, he would be the number 1 running back and the number 1 player in fantasy football. So I still have him higher than most are going to have him, sitting at 4 among running backs. And that might be too low for Christian McCaffrey. No Deebo Samuel means more of the load is going to fall on McCaffrey. Just to give you an idea of how dynamic CMC is as a fantasy asset, Saquon Barkley last year was the number 1 running back in fantasy football. Of course, he ran for 2,000 yards. He had 15 touchdowns. He still scored 70 points less than Christian McCaffrey did in 2023 when CMC was RB1. When McCaffrey is the best running back in fantasy, he is far better than the typical best season you get from running backs in fantasy football. Translation, he is the cheat code, not a cheat code. He is the cheat code. I cannot put him any lower than number 4. Number 5 for me, Devon Achane, top 10 in average points per game in the back end of last season, or rather top 10 points per game. This was now back-to-back seasons that he's done this. And I think when we walked into last year in the 2024 season, we asked, can he stay healthy? Well, he passed that test. He played all 17 games, caught 78 passes. He's a touchdown machine. All I can think when it comes to Achane is league-winning upside, given his explosiveness, his speed in the open field, and how much that Dolphins offense is starting to really lean on him. If he puts it all together and their offense relies on him even more and he stays healthy, the sky is the limit for Devon Achane. The only issue for me, it's not him. It's his quarterback, Tua. He has been significantly better when Tua is on the field. He is 5 PPR points better when Tua is playing quarterback for the Dolphins than when anybody else is. And their best offensive line, Teron Armstead, he just retired. So I don't love that. There are reasons to question Devon Achane, but he's an absolute fantasy superstar. So I got him at 5. Number 6, Derrick Henry, the freight train, King Henry. And even at 6, like Christian McCaffrey, I feel like I'm a little too low on Derrick Henry. The more I think about Henry, the fewer holes that I can poke in his game. Age, of course, is the biggest concern, but the Ravens have shown no reluctance. They just extended him. So money where your mouth is. They're saying we're still all in on this guy. We don't care that he's 31. He's coming off of the most productive season he has had as a professional. The offense is still elite. I think the big issue for me isn't so much the player. It's not the age. It's how do they use him early on in the season, where in fantasy football, I'm trying to collect wins early. If you get behind the 8 ball, you're 1-4 in the first 5 weeks. It's really hard to make the playoffs in fantasy football. And if I were running the Baltimore Ravens, I would say Derrick Henry is capped at 12 carries until about week 7, until we get to Thanksgiving, perhaps, because you don't need this guy until the playoffs from a real football perspective. So that's what holds me back on Henry a little bit, is if Baltimore is thinking about this long term, why would you give Derrick Henry 20 to 25 carries in week 2? It doesn't make any sense. So that can hold you back in terms of what where you're able to be early on in the fantasy season. I could be totally overthinking this because I'm not on the Ravens coaching staff, and he's awesome. So I got him at 6 for that reason. At number 7, Jonathan Taylor, who to me is basically Derrick Henry light. He is a big-bodied back with the ability to run for 2,000 yards, doesn't catch any passes like Derrick Henry. He is just in an offense that's far less potent than Baltimore's, but we also get a couple of extra years of youth on our side with JT. Back end of last season, week 10 on, he was as good as anybody else in football. The last 3 games, even better. 177 yards, 125 yards, and 218 yards rushing in those last 3 weeks. 6 touchdowns over that 3-week span. The dude is an absolute stud. I feel very good about my top 7. The top 7 to me is kind of in a class of its own. Then we start getting into some of the bigger question marks. At 8, I have Bucky Irving of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was sensational as a rookie, finished his RB14 in PPR, and didn't take over the bulk of the work from Rachaad White until about week 10. Now, he still has Rachaad White to contend with, and they're going to factor in other running backs because that's just the way that Tampa operates, although they do have a new offensive coordinator, so we'll see. But, I mean, they have to see what we all see. The talent is just it is far superior for Bucky Irving as opposed to anybody else that's in that backfield. He's shifty. He's a tackle breaker. He's a big play guy. He's a great pass catcher. This is a very fantasy-friendly landscape for him in Tampa. O-line is good, and defenses are far more concerned with the passing attack. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, they just added Emeka Egbuka. They've got Jalen McMillan. The running lanes are going to be wide open for Bucky this season. I'm all over Bucky Irving. Very excited to draft him. Number 9 on my list is Josh Jacobs. It was the Josh Jacobs show in Green Bay last season. I think this is one that a lot of us missed on because you assume that Jacobs perhaps was breaking down after all of that work that he got in Vegas, and then he goes to Green Bay, where Matt LaFleur has liked to use multiple running backs over the years. Maybe that's just because he hasn't had anybody as good as Josh Jacobs. Jacobs was awesome last season. He took over that offense, and health-wise, he's one of the most reliable running backs in football. Since 2020, the guy's missed like 4 or 5 games. So not much to say here. He's just as consistent as they come in terms of their commitment to the run. They've got it. The Packers had the second highest run rate in the league, behind only the Philadelphia Eagles, who we know are as dominant as it gets on the ground. Look no further than my number 1 ranked running back. At number 10, this is where the controversy comes in, I believe, for me, unless you're really up in arms about the Christian McCaffrey ranking. Ashton Genty. This is probably as low as you're going to see him on any list. I am not high on Genty this year. I mean, I still have him in the top 10, and yet that feels like I'm dangerously low. This is one that I'm bullish on, though. I'm not going to budge on this. He's number 10 for a reason. And I mean, honestly, gave him a little bit of a bump just because that offense should be all his, and a little bit of Brock Bowers as well. But I know that I'm not going to be getting any of him, putting him at 10. I think he's a great player, but he came from a smaller school. He's coming off of a year where he put up these gaudy numbers, and the history of that conversion year 1 in an NFL career just isn't pretty. And if you look at the name value, or you take the name value out of it, and I just told you, okay, you can have the RB1 in Las Vegas. Where are you taking him? It's certainly not round 1. It's definitely not top 7, which is where he's going right now in fantasy football drafts. Just way too rich. I do not think he should be a first-round pick in fantasy football. He is going to be, and so I will not be getting any of Ashton Genty. I like him as a player, and I love the situation. I love the opportunity that he is going to be getting, because he's going to be the number 1 back, and Pete Carroll loves to run the football and all of that, but the Raiders stink. And I just don't really want their number 1 running back, certainly not at a top 7 price. Number 11 for me is Kyren Williams, another pillar of consistency here, 15 plus PPR points in 10 of 16 games last season. He's got a nose for the end zone. His 3-year average is 11 touchdowns per year. And we know that offensive scheming is never going to be a problem when you have Sean McVay, who's running the show. And it's another team that runs way more than you think. The Rams have the 9th highest run rate in the NFL. Kyren Williams, you know exactly what you're going to get. You draft Kyren Williams, people in the room aren't going to go, oh, man, that was my guy. That's not going to happen. But just know that you're getting a good player. And then 12, my final spot, I really struggled with this 12th spot. The top 11 for me is, if 7 is kind of its own tier, the top 7, I think 11 is where I feel great. If that is my first running back, I feel pretty good about any of the top 11. The 12th spot, I bounced back and forth between James Cook and Chase Brown, but the reality is I know myself. And if I'm on the clock and the 11 running backs that we've already talked about are off the board, I am slinging for upside, and I'm going to sling for the upside of Omarion Hampton of the Los Angeles Chargers. James Cook was so good last year, but a lot of that production was touchdown based, and that is really tough to repeat year over year. Chase Brown was awesome. Great pass catcher, was a much better running back between the tackles than many of us thought that he could be. He's kind of like the modern day Austin Eckler, but his best games were when Zach Moss was off the field. When Zach Moss was playing at any point in the season, Chase Brown was decent, but he wasn't a fantasy star. And in the top 12, I still think we have the opportunity here to draft a superstar at the position. I just don't view Brown as a true blue 3-down back, and I don't think Cincinnati does either. So he'll get first run. It's still a guy that I would like to have on my team, but we're talking top 12. I have to get very picky here. I like both of those guys, James Cook and Chase Brown, but Hampton to me is the cheaper version of Ashton Genty, and he's in a much better situation. Jim Harbaugh wants to run the football. Even with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards last year, they were still top 10 in run rate. And this offseason, they upgraded big time. They add Najee Harris, who already got into a dumb fireworks accident. I don't think it's going to take more than a month for Jim Harbaugh and that coaching staff to figure out that Omarion Hampton is the better of the two. He's a better pass catcher. He's more explosive. Remember, Hampton, like Genty, they were the only 2 running backs drafted in round 1 this year. Teams do not use round 1 picks on running backs unless they absolutely love them and unless they intend to use them a lot. That is my top 12 running backs in fantasy football. That does it for this week's episode. Be back at it next week with my top 12 quarterbacks in fantasy. Visit zoneheadsmedia.com. Keep up with everything that I've got going on. You can check out my whole list of partners there, as well as daily bets. At Brandon Kravitz, at Zoneheads on social. Be back next week.